Nobody's listening.
Now.
Thank you. It is truly an honor. And I say that a little bit in smile, but that's because I'm a little embarrassed. Not because I take it lightly. I gave some thought after some folks approached me about possibly serving as chair. And I was a little nervous because, as you know, I have two small children. So I was like, I don't know if I have the time. But then I did honestly look around at school meeting and town meeting. And again, I was just very awed by democracy in action. And it is really cool to be a part of, and really wonderful to have the opportunity to serve. And so with that, I do just want to thank everyone. And it's been very insightful to learn from you, Mark, and honestly, Jonathan's not here, but from him as well. And so hopefully I can do my best to lead us through another budget season. And with that, so we've done swearing in of new members and call to order and election of budget committee chair. And so now I believe we need to elect a vice chair.
I nominate Mark.
Oh, no.
Yes, I second.
That makes sense if he's gonna help.
I actually would love to see if someone else would be interested in doing that role, because I'm already chairing the Hopkinton Community Power Committee, have some other things. But more importantly, like, I just think it's good for there to be new leadership over time. And I did my term as chair, and I'm not going to be the chair again in the future, or at least I don't anticipate it. So I think it's nice for someone to be in the vice chair role who might be a future chair, as Krista did. So I would respectfully love to decline that and see if somebody else would be interested in, not because I don't think it's important, I'd do it, but I think it'd be nice if somebody else was willing to do it with that in mind.
Is anybody else interested in doing it? Yes, I'm.
It also has to be an elected member.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just you for
As
the
long
record.
as you understand my situation too, and I will do my best to step in when needed.
Well, I nominate Deb then.
I'll second.
There you go. I would be honored if Debbie
I
could
would
serve
be
alongside.
honored. Thank you.
Girl power. Girl power. Is girl power all right?
It's been all right for two
I
men to
didn't think
serve
about
for
that.
centuries.
No, I think it's best this way.
Oh.
I'm gonna go with more than a friend.
I'll wear a skirt and we'll be able to threesome here.
Let's do it.
White
All right.
Christmas.
Whatever you're talking about, you should stop that. Probably not anything you want.
This is being recorded.
All right, so then there's a motion and it's been seconded. I can call a vote. How do I say that again? Suddenly.
All in favor, aye.
But I say call a vote, right? Is that the
Yeah,
right phrase?
you could say-
Okay,
You can say anything you want, you're the chair.
okay, good to know. That's again, something about power, but all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? All right, and we have it. So
Well, thank you.
congratulations to Debbie, our
Wow.
vice chair.
Thank you, Debbie.
I'll do my best.
Okay. May I interrupt the agenda to say that I texted Dulcie Madden, the Poma, who tells me that Charlie is en route to New York and is not coming.
Okay, good to know. Well, we will see Charlie next time then.
We should assign him some work.
Yeah. Track the inflation rates across the past 50 years or something.
Let's drop off 15 town.
We'll quit due Monday.
And so next we need to approve the public hearing minutes of February 7th, which Neil kindly sent out. I reviewed those offline and saw nothing alarming personally.
I just want to note that Beverly Zant is the one who did these.
Oh.
So she's our new executive assistant, so she'll be doing all the minutes from the recording.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Nice.
Perfect. I did notice
It's
that
wonderful.
they were well organized.
Yeah.
That's one thing
Yeah,
that I
they
noticed.
really are.
Very nice.
And the screenshots are really
I'll-
effective.
I'll move that we approve the minutes, but I do have a
a change proposed.
Second,
My proposed correction is on page 7.
Mind if I look
The
No, not at all.
page 7 is my presentation on the town budget, followed by public comment. And then at the end of public comment, it jumps back to Mr. NATO summarized some school district. And I think that was just in effect, a repeat.
Oh, like this part is duplicated elsewhere.
It shouldn't be and I was hoping Rob would be here to say if it should be in another spot or just removed.
Okay.
I think it's correct the way it happened.
yeah.
I think that's
because I
another
think
topic.
It refers to Ken, I think you're right in that there was public comment that was, but the comment above it by Julie LeBeau was about the school district budget, and I think that's what Rob was responding to. Maybe not. Yeah, I know, I see what
I
you're
don't-
saying, but maybe not.
I don't think so. I think that it's that Mr. NATO summarized the school district's proposed warrant articles, maybe is supposed to be capitalized. Like it's a different section.
Oh, the new section.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
that would be, probably would work
Or
well.
maybe it is supposed to be, because it says that the first section is Hopkinton School District operating budget and other warrant articles. This is the. And so probably the warrant articles.
Okay, so just maybe the parts started with Mr. NATO should be highlighted.
Or moved to the school district section, which is, I think, what you were proposing at first.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
But I think this is the way it was presented. The budget was presented, both budgets were presented, and
Okay.
then you went back to the
Okay,
school district warrant articles.
in which case perhaps it should just be capitalized to be clear that it's a
add
new
that.
section.
Yeah.
Here, go ahead.
Okay. Do we need to move again, or I know you seconded?
Okay, I'll move to approve it with that change.
Great. And are you seconding again, Mark? Okay,
Yes, I'm seconding.
great. So calling a vote to approve the meeting minutes with a change to capitalize Mr. NATO summarize the school district proposed warrant articles to make it clear it's a distinct section.
Mhm.
All the ayes,
I,
all the nays. Okay. The ayes have it. The meeting minutes are approved. Okay, now we have a debriefing of annual meetings. I don't believe this is a formal presentation. This is an opportunity for us to discuss right now. Okay.
It is.
So one, I'm happy to kick off. I reflected, and I think there was a comment, I don't recall if it was at the town meeting or the school meeting. So from someone in the public about why the budget committee was not standing to defend the numbers ourselves more strongly. I don't know that I agree with that comment, in full, because I feel like it's not the budget committee's job to subsume the town's presentation or the school's presentation. But I do think that it nods to a comment that was made at our last, our public hearing, I think, where there was a question as to what the overall effect on the tax rate would be between the two budgets. And between the two of those comments, I do feel like this year we have an opportunity to do a little bit of a better job as a steward of summarizing the holistic impact for the town, and perhaps putting that either in our, like, a couple page write-up from the budget committee, or maybe we can get a slide in the overall presentation, something that says, as a budget committee, we have looked into and considered the holistic impact across across the two budgets, and serve as kind of the stewards of that information. But that was my one main takeaway. Otherwise, I felt like the hearings this year went very smooth and well attended, which was nice to see. But I'm open to others.
I have an answer, I think, to that concern, and I heard it from myself and everybody that was there.
Mm.
Just pass those down.
Thank you.
This is what I did 4 years in a row, back a few years, and Neil made the copies, and we literally handed them out at both the school board meeting and the others. These are the 4 years that I did. And I don't have to get down through basic, but you can just see, I think it's a very legitimate thing, and we should do that again. This is a format that I had come up with and used it for the 4 years. It's kind of interesting, that we had the first year in 16, we had the deal where the budget committee didn't want, and these are check marks for the items I'm just going to talk about, starting with 2016. We had the year where they were trying to introduce a football program, and we voted against it. And then we had the other items on here, which were not impacting the tax rate for that year, but it was the bond for the $3 million for the track that we said we were not recommending that. So that was noted at the bottom of the 2016. And then moving to 17, that was a kind of a clean year. We didn't have anything that we didn't recommend. And then we moved to the 2018, where we had the SAU building that the school was recommending, and we recommended against that. And you can see that at the top, it was not recommended, the 225,000. That's in year 18. But it again shows all the impacts of each of the warrant articles, et cetera. And then we come to 2019, where the budget committee asked for a $350,000 cut in it, and that was voted down. And then a certain member of the budget committee made a recommendation to put $100,000 back in it, and that was successful. There was about 100 people that voted on that first one and then weren't there to vote on the second one. But I think this is the kind of thing that we need to do. We have an obligation to, because we're the only party in town that puts all of the pieces together. So that again, and anything can be changed on here or added to it or whatever. But I think it needs to be a 1 page, just a quick summary of showing all the pieces.
I have a question. So with regards to, for example, the SAU building, was that included in the proposed operating budget, or was that a separate?
Separate warrant. And that's how it's shown down here as a separate warrant.
Got it.
Up at the top, that's the whole McGill, everything in.
Got it.
For the school and the town, et cetera.
Are you familiar with where that building was that they wanted to buy?
The
It was next,
Two Villages Art Society or whatever?
no, it was next to the ball fields on Park Ave. Where,
Girls Club.
It's now a private residence.
Got it.
and we all toured it, and it needed a lot of work.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't care that they didn't get their building. I was just wondering whether or not it was like separate and therefore it was easy to not recommend, or if it was buried and we had to parse that out.
Separate.
It was
Very
separate.
There was some logic to it because it was pretty close to the high school and close to the fields,
Absolutely.
but other than that, it was bad.
Mhm.
There was no room for expansion, really. I mean, it's sort of landlocked right there.
So I think it's a great idea. I like both. I think we call this the one sheet, and a slide is a different thing. I think they would both be helpful. The slide is just even more concise, right? And the slide, in my opinion, gets put into every presentation, starting at the public hearings, right? Hello.
It'll be nice to have this in the town report, but this is a moving target, and sometimes it gets changed right at the very,
Yeah.
literally the last day, the school might pull something out. It's nice to keep it as current as possible.
I also I like this, Don. I don't remember why we got away from doing this.
I think we got into COVID, and that
Yeah.
was one of the problems.
There was a pretty messy budget year. But anyway, I love the idea of going back to the 1 pager. I'm so glad you brought this up, Krista. That was very clear, and it is, I think, the budget committee's purview and role to provide that. The slide is harder, I'll just say, because the town meeting is the town's presentation, and as you could tell from when you were getting peppered with questions, Ken, it's really it puts, I think, the town in a difficult position to be sharing information about school budget and vice versa. And so I personally am not sure we can ask the town or the school to put a slide in their deck, but I do think we can provide this as a handout and should.
So we also you gave a brief message in
Yeah,
at the beginning of the meeting, not just but the year prior, right?
yeah. So this is also something I think that might be worth revisiting. Janet, when she was the chair, at least some years, I don't know if every year, she was asked by the school board and or the select board to share some remarks on behalf of the budget committee as the chair at the beginning of, I don't remember if it was both town and school meeting, but it was at least town meeting. And she did it, kind of give a bit of a big picture. Here's how the budget, and so I did that one year. The second year I was chair, Sarah, I think it was Sarah Persino's, perhaps her first year moderating. And she basically said, you can't do that. You can only speak, I'm going to let you speak on Article 2, which was the operating budget, and you can only provide comments on Article 2, the operating budget. You can't talk big picture about the town as a whole or as the town as a school. And while that wouldn't have been my preference, she's a moderator, it's her decision. And it wasn't asked, we did ask the school if they wanted us to provide some introductory comments. They declined.
This year?
No, this was like when I was
Okay,
chair the
yeah.
first couple of years. So I think that's a nice thing. And it's up to the moderator of each of those meetings, whether they would are willing to have the budget committee chair give an overview or not, and how. I would say after this second year and what the boundaries that Sarah put on it, I didn't want to sign up for it again because I didn't feel like that was actually very useful.
Right.
And so it put me in a weird position, and I didn't think it was that informative for voters. And so again, that's her purview, but I wouldn't do it again. I wouldn't recommend we do that.
Rich also got forced into doing it one year when Janet refused to do it. And he got up, in a moment's notice and did a hell of a good job, summarizing it. But
Yeah.
Again, and the school fought allowing us to do this the first year, second year, because they didn't want to ever tie the big picture. They wanted to always deal with just the school and separate itself from whatever.
We're in a
else.
different place today.
Well, no, I'm just saying that's past school
Yeah.
board. Now I think the school board would be very receptive, to doing something like this.
Well, and even if they're not, we can give this out.
Seems to me this would be really helpful. And one of the confusions at town meeting was we did put all the warrant articles together,
Oh, yeah.
and then people got confused what they were voting on. So I think if the budget committee did a presentation which said, this is the impact if everything passes, it's your budget, really, legally. And then then the operating budget is presented by the select board or the budget committee if it's different. And then each article separately. It seems like that would be less confusing and provide that. It's really hard from a town standpoint when people ask questions, I think during the budget, that they want to know what the school voted. And I know, I don't think any of us are comfortable talking about what the voters had already voted, even
Yeah.
what the school had, but it is the budget committee's role to kind of do that.
By handing this out, people have, as the thing is moving through both of the meetings, they have a piece of paper in front of them that tells them the specific impact of that particular topic.
Mhm.
And they can keep referring to it all through both meetings.
And they can do their own back of the napkin math
Yep.
if they want to.
If they take it out, I mean, all the numbers are there, the total number that you divide by is all there if they want to do it. So I just think that we ought to go back to do it again.
Yeah, thanks for these.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, if I could just ask, so, Mark, excuse me, you see it as, the presentation, for example, that it would be mainly an objective, going over of what we're offering here, or how we approached the whole season would,
Yeah, I don't
with
know.
this-
I guess I mean, Neil, I think your idea is interesting, that would have to be a conversation, I think, with the boards and the moderators to see, you know, would they, and Krista, you'd have to want to do this, which I'm not, you know, like, think about that. Or the vice chair.
That's why
absence,
I'm
but like,
asking just to have.
Yeah, I mean, I always felt like, boy, I don't want to be put in the position of having to present one of these budgets because. And when we had the year where we were really at odds, I'd say with the school district, it was, Janet was chair, that, I think that may have been her last year's chair. It was really, there was a lot of disagreement about how do you present this budget and whose responsibility it is. So simply providing this as a handout when people walk in would be a big step forward, I think.
Yeah.
And, you know, whether that also translates into a 3-minute, you know, here's the high level, like just the numbers on the budget, and now the town will present article by article, like.
That's
might-
really what
that
I
might
meant,
work
if that
well
wasn't clear.
too, but even if you didn't do that and you just handed this out, that would be a big step forward for.
The difficulty of any kind of a big picture presentation, you're subjecting yourself to the whole 500, 600 people asking you questions. And I don't think that's what anybody wants to get into. That's not what the role would be.
I think it's more part of opening remarks, and you wouldn't take questions until you had an article on the floor.
Which will go to the. which will go to
And
the
again, I don't
respective
think the
board.
budget committee at that venue, my personal opinion, at that venue wouldn't be the budget committee defending or doing anything about
No, I think
a
it would-
It
particular.
would be the
Question.
governing bodies.
So that feels like a good conversation to.
Yeah,
to
It
explore.
sounds like we have at minimum an agreement to have a version of this one pager
Mhm.
that we can print out. And it sounds like consensus opinion that would be useful for us to do as a goal this year. And then, optionally, perhaps depending on how conversations with the moderator go and the budget season are progressing, we can see about potentially providing opening remarks. That sound great.
And you certainly could at the budget hearing, which is your budget hearing,
Yes.
which makes sense too.
And actually, that's a good point, Neil, because that probably would have been a good forum for us to have
Mm.
a few slides with joint impact. Let me write that down.
It seems like that's the best forum because it is our meeting. The other meetings, while it's our budget, it's not our meeting. Yeah, I mean, I see a real difference there.
And I think that was done pre-COVID too. A lot sort of
Mhm.
changed when we're on Zoom.
Yeah, that's a really good idea, that. And then, you know, if for some reason it carried forward, you have the template from the budget hearing already.
Do we know if they're probably past what pre-COVID versions of this loaded on the available publicly? I can look into that. Like if there were presentations from. the
And if they're
budget
not
committee.
public, if there's like slides and stuff,
Yeah.
I would probably have those, I think.
I was not on the committee pre-COVID, hence.
I mean, Janet didn't do slides, so she would have just probably read some prepared, I remember Janet would read prepared notes that she had put together. I honestly don't remember if I did any slides before.
Yeah, neither.
One of those meetings back, I'd have to go, my daughter actually did the whole presentation, and I think either you've got that disc, or maybe I can get it from my daughter to just, it was the whole Megillah presentation.
If it was
We had
presented and it was on my computer, I saved it.
Okay, it's got slide, it's got the whole thing through it. But again, that's a hell of a project, it's a lot of work.
Well, I think that we have incremental things that we can build on.
Yep.
A one pager goal, a few slides for the hearing, and then we'll take it from there.
Yep.
Great. Do we have to make a motion on that or anything? Okay.
I don't think you have.
Then any other topics to debrief from the annual meetings?
It was so nice to see so many people come out. That's it felt like what you would want your town and school district meetings to be. Even when I was getting really tired at 11:15 at night, town meeting, as everybody else was, and there were interesting recount things happening and all that, but I think the process served us well, and it was just awesome to see so many people come out.
I guess I would like to see more people at the working meetings that happen during the real part of the budget season, not just the public hearing. And maybe there's a way we do send it out electronically, but not everyone notices, but like a sandwich board or something, you know, that we keep, you know, budget meeting tonight. Come in here, what's going on, whatever, just something at Colonial, something at the library, whatever.
Mm.
Do you know, Neil, has there ever been a way to announce the timing of the hearings outside of just posting it on the website? I know that sometimes Susan Covert has it in her emails.
She generally does. We put it on the town Facebook page, the website. There are postings, required postings. If there's other ways, we're always looking at more ways to get more people involved.
Krista, one of the things I did as chair is I actually would always send Susan a note the week before the meeting saying, budget committee's meeting next. It's had a little template email, you know, here's the link to the budget committee's website, and it just prompted her, I think, to put something in her newsletter.
We do announce everything at senior lunch to try to get it to the senior population who may not have computers as much, but
Also, we should tell Charles that one of the things you have to do as a first-year budget committee member is wear a sandwich board outside
Yeah.
the barrel and basket on budget committee meetings.
Mark
Just
I like
track
that
of
idea.
Part of the
Initiation.
initiation. You did that, Vicky, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I wore green for money.
I guess what I'd like to say is that the high turnout that we had this year was definitely due to SB2.
Yeah.
And I think that people want to have a direct vote on more things. I think the high taxes that we have in this town, you know, at least what I've heard around the water cooler is that, you know, people want to vote on things. They just don't want selectmen to decide things for them. They don't want school board to just decide this. They want, you know, community action votes, petition votes, and not letting other people decide everything.
Rich, I'd agree with you that the turnout was as high as it was because of SB2. The very disappointing thing, and what contradicts what you're saying, is that right after SB2, we had the budget and the vote on the budget, and there were 300 less votes. Everybody left.
Yeah.
Or, you know, almost half the people left.
Yeah.
So, you know, how can you say they want an open discussion about the budget?
No, they want a chance to vote on things.
Well, we should
But-
take
but-
that room
Right.
by staying.
Yeah, they don't, people want to be able to go to the ballot box and vote. They don't want to have to go to town meeting and school meeting.
That's different, though, I think, than what you stated in your opening statement. It's just a different interpretation, because I feel same feeling if they talk about the deliberative sessions, that's where all this discussion should be. But in almost any town that you look at, there's less than 50 people that go to that. And that, I think, is as close a situation as our real town meeting is, where you get 300 to 700 people.
Right. I wasn't speaking in favor of SB2. I was just saying that people want to be able to vote on things rather than let the committees do all the work.
Yeah, and I mean, Rich, I think your point, like SB2 failed, but it got a lot of votes, more than 50% in the school meeting, less than 50% in the town meeting. There's clearly a significant number of people in town who are dissatisfied with the current form of government. Some amount of that, probably maybe most of it, is budget related, and you know, rightly or wrongly, and just, you know, but frustration with the budgeting process. So like, we personally, I do not think we should have a tin ear to that. I do not think the select board or the school board should have a tin ear to
What does that mean?
a tin ear, like as in like, that should be, we should listen. That sentiment is strong, it's out there. I felt like the discussion on SB2 was really interesting and really respectful. And, I voted against it, but I really understood a lot of the
And
arguments
as did
for it.
I, as did
But I
I.
understand a lot of the arguments for it. And, yeah, so I guess what I mean by not having a 10-year is, the budgets were up a lot this year. And there was all sorts of good reasons for that. But we have some significant things coming down the pike with more road stuff, the lagoons, the PFAS cleanup. And so, I guess for me, my takeaway is, we should be asking lots of hard questions as a budget committee. Around where are there additional revenue opportunities, like impact fees, and I don't know if impact fees are a good idea, but we should be trying to ask hard questions around revenue opportunities and proposed expenditures, which is not to say we weren't doing that, but I think that's going to be increasingly important for us. That's my big takeaway.
I think the reverse of that is we need to have some forum to be able to say, if we're going to not increase the budget by the inflation rate, which is over $1 million for the town and the school, if we're not going to even do that, what are we going to have to cut? And have those things almost like the school had their list of the bucket list of what they're going to have to cut out. We need to have that ready for everybody to see of what services, at what level are we going to cut them? Are we going to cut, again, I'm repeating myself, but are we going to increase the time frame for the plow routes? Are they going to go from 3 hours to 5 hours to 6 hours where there may be a foot of snow on the road, but we don't do sanding or salting except early in the morning just before school? Those kinds of things are where you might be able to cut the town budget. And services of other types. Are we going to cut the police force that we have? I mean, that's possible, but we need to articulate what that means. Does it mean no 24 hours coverage? Same thing with the fire department. Are we going to find a way to cut the service of what the fire department does? And the school would have to do this, I think should do the same kind of thing. If you're going to cut their budget, how many teachers are you going to let go? And what programs are you going to have to cancel? To have those already out for the public to understand even before we go into the budget process. So that people begin to understand if you're going to cut the budget, and obviously, the lower quarter of this town is really suffering to try to pay their taxes, whether they're water or whether they're sewer or whatever. And they're the ones that are hurting. The upper half, could care less, I think, about their taxes. So that it's their discretionary income is a heck of a lot more. But I think we need to be able to say, here's what the means of cutting service. It's going to come down to, again, a majority vote. And the majority, I think, is going to say, we really want to cut services. And that's where the rock hits the road. But I think we need to prepare ourselves for that argument up front, not trying to defend it at the last moment.
Don,
Asking the school to say, hey, you're going to cut $500,000 out of it, and they're going, from a just a quick reaction as to what that's going to be. It ought to be planned out because we know it's coming.
I was anticipating a question along that line, and I didn't have the specific answer, but I would just look at history. Where is the select board cut when they had to cut? It was roads.
Yeah, that's true.
And,
Yeah.
and, potentially that would be what the answer would be.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a number of people who are going to say, then cut it. Because my road is good, I don't care.
Yeah.
Cut it.
That's true.
If a bridge falls down, we have an alternate route.
Can I say something? I feel like I totally understand why you're saying that because it makes it real. These big numbers are difficult, especially the tax rate and how does that relate to me versus you because our houses are different. But not this time, but last time, the discussion over the 4th grade teacher that stirred so much emotion that came forward when we asked for specifics and they gave us specifics was an important conversation that I feel as though did not end up describing what would have happened if we had kept the money out of the budget. That you can see that they decided to go with a different plan. You know, they told us this teacher would have to go, we would have to cut the reading specialist, and we forced them to make those specific statements. But then when they had extra money, they put it toward a person, and they're cutting that fourth grade teacher this upcoming year anyway. So all of that conversation that went into why it was important, the fourth graders, I don't want to say it was a red herring because I don't think they were lying to us, but I do feel as though forcing them to make these specific things made us talk about very specific things that then we were told was not our purview. And I feel like that made me want to step back and say, inflation, do we decide, yes, no, it should keep up with inflation, it should be flat because everyone is suffering? Or is it something where we get to ask about the 0.4 reading specialist? Because that's what I'm told, that's not our purview. So I get very antsy now thinking about 4 minutes versus 5 minutes ambulance thing, because that almost feels like a threat. You know what I mean? Like they would probably just cut the road budget. They wouldn't reduce the number of ambulances. You know what I mean? They would triage it. It wouldn't be an even reduction across the board. And Neil would, if we said, Neil, you got to cut 5.4%. Neil would take a scalpel, not a hatchet, right? And he would cut 80,000 here and 500 here. So forcing him or forcing us to go through that thought exercise, it feels like it obscures the big numbers that we're being asked to approve. And I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it's a programmatic idea. I think it's something that we would ask them, do you have this? But we know they have it for the roads, right? When you have enough money, this road is first, this road is second, this road is third.
I'm just talking about historically.
No, I know. No, I know. I'm just saying, like, you have a priority list, which is so kind of the opposite of a cut list. But I feel like the cut list would be totally, so it would have to be so hypothetical that it would maybe obscure like the conversation about the big numbers. Because people get caught up about the fourth grade teacher.
I love how, sorry.
No.
Like this is, I'm glad you're making space for this because this is a super important conversation at the outset of the budget year. And it's one that we've struggled with. It's really hard to find. I think that tension you're describing is going to be like a level of discomfort and probably a spectrum of views about what is in and not in our purview that we're going to continue to wrestle with. It's, I think, something that's been wrestled with in the 8 years I've been on the budget committee, and it will continue to be. It's hard to talk about adjustments to the budget without having some sense of what are the implications. And yet we also know that at the end of the day, it's a bottom line budget. And, you know, the board and the administration are going to manage that budget with the money that the town has given them. And what they end up spending on may not be exactly what, you know, changes they make probably won't be exactly as we might have envisioned them in January or February.
Sure.
So it's just a tension, I think, that's real, and that we'll continue to wrestle with. And you just described it so well, like something that I feel like we could do, and we did this once or twice, but I'm not sure we did it in the best way possible, is to, I mean, we as a budget committee can say to the school and the town, we are expecting that we will not be, we would have to talk about this and vote on this, but we find it hard to imagine that we are going to vote to support an operating budget that has that's higher than the increase that's higher than inflation. And so if you're coming in with a budget that's higher than inflation, which you might decide to do for all reasons, we would like to also know what the implications of getting down to the, to the level of inflation or whatever that number is that I feel like we could craft a request like that to the school board and the select board. And not say like, tell us what positions you would cut or this or that. Maybe give us a broad sense of the implications. They can give us however much detail they want. I defer to the boards on that.
Yeah.
I think our role is at the macro level, like, we're not sure we could support a budget higher than inflation because people are struggling out there. So anyway, it's just like a little bit of processing out loud of what.
I
what
really
we're feeling.
support that and like that idea of where you're going with that, Mark. And the reason too, what keeps haunting me in the background is that it's always been said that we come up with the budget, we can approve it, excuse me, or we don't. But in the long run, where those funds are actually spent, they are going to determine where they are. That is not in our purview, as we've said. And it's not necessarily going to be. They can explain this is what we are looking at, but it's not necessarily what's going to happen. So I like just being in that macro that's, especially since it's not our purview to determine. Well, we don't want that cut, but we'll be okay with this. That's.
Yeah, I think it's been 100% consensus here, if we've gone through this for all the years that we have, that we do not want to micromanage. We do
Right.
not want to tell them this and this and this. At most we've ever gone to is we're saying that that big chunk at the top of their budget, which is what all their personnel costs are, that's where we want to have them take it out. And we've been told by the municipal association lawyers, we can't nitpick each one. That's not our purview. It's not we can't do it. So we have gone to just saying reduce 350,000 or whatever the number is. But I think, again, we've got consensus that we're not going to micromanage them. So what you're saying is true, but they're going to have to come back and say, all right, if you tell us that, here's what's going to happen. And then we've got to make the judgment. Are we in agreement with that? Are we not in agreement with that? So that's where I'm coming at. We need to have them prepped, as the town should be prepped, as to if we tell them a certain thing, what's it gonna look like? And they're gonna have to come back with those things of what it looks like. I'm just saying they ought to be prepared for that, thinking of that process, not at the end of this November, December, January, start talking about it in June and July.
But this is
Because it's coming, because the
Yeah.
town is saying, we can't afford to spend as much money as we had. We can't afford to have the school coming in with $1 to $2 million of increase every year. And the town is gonna have their increase. We know we got the roads, we know we got the lagoons, we know it's coming. And there's no darn way around it. And even to think that theoretically, we're gonna cut a lot of this out of there, we're not gonna be able to do it, because we're obligated to do this.
Right.
Unless we severely cut services, and no one, the majority, I won't say no one, the majority are gonna say, we're not gonna cut services.
Right. But you're saying like physical plant, we can't get away from contracts, we can't get away from. So services is where you can flex.
Maybe, yes. Well, that's where you got, that's where you got it going.
You keep focusing on the schools. I thank you for that. But the physical plant on the town, it's gonna be the roads. But I mean, I like the idea of, and I think we've done it more than 1 year to give guidance to the select board and the school board, try to keep the rate within 1% of inflation or something like that. But if we talking just the operating budget, we talking the reserves, all capital ones also, because it creates a major difference.
But talking a whole McGill, it's got to be the whole thing.
And that's fine if that's the direction, and how do you take into account new bonds and the huge costs that's coming down from them?
Because the taxpayer doesn't care. He just says, what's the number I'm gonna have to pay for my house? He could care less about all the pieces for the end result.
And that was the reason for the high turnout towards SB2. It was the people telling us in the only way that they could that they're unhappy with the high levels of expenditures, the 8% increases, the 12% increases that we've seen the last couple of years. So I think we have to respect that. I mean, we had 52% of the people vote for SB2, saying, we want what we're spending in our schools and our towns to more closely be down towards inflation.
And just speaking for me, if I was able to go back to the select board and say, the budget committee is saying, inflation should be the cap on the tax rate, period. And then everybody would have that in mind. It wouldn't guarantee that that would be what was presented here, but it would help, let's say me anyway, of trying to, cut things as the select board's talking about. But I'm still afraid it would come back mainly to roads on our side.
Well,
I
and
think
you
that
got
that's
the
where-
bond though for the sludge problem. I mean, you know, you
That
got.
would hit roads even harder then.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, the sludge removal, because of state mandate, federal mandate, whatever, that's gotta come first.
Are you talking about the landfill?
Yeah.
thing?
Right.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Not the sludge removal, but
The septage lagoons.
thank you.
Septic lagoon and the septic tank results lagoon. There's two things that was going on.
Oh, pulling the sludge out of the lagoons and putting them into the landfill.
Well, we don't know what that is. Well, we know it's millions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to think that, that the bond on that's gonna be, I don't know, 300, 400, 500,000. You probably know better than I do on that for sure, each year. And that sucks up all the money that we're sort of theoretically saying we want to cap. And that's before you do anything else.
Yeah.
Before you do
So
anything with the roads.
I think I don't know that anybody's ready to vote on a recommended number tonight. I'm
There's
guessing
not
that's
enough of us.
probably let's sit on it.
Yep.
And think about it for the next meeting, but to the point that you made, Don, I do think that even if we moved forward with a percentage increase the budget committee feels comfortable with, maybe it's inflation. It does come down to like, what are the implications of a number, of holding that number? So I would expect if we were to take this vote, the ask then to the town, for example, would be something like the budget committee is comfortable with an overall increase of, I'm going to say inflation, but I know that we didn't vote on that, of inflation.
Yeah.
And if the town is bringing warrants or other raises of funds for uses like roads or the sludge removal, then it would be like the conversation would then be, okay, here's what we can do within the confines that the budget committee put forward, and here are the other funds we want to raise or spend that would push us above that number. We think it's worth doing because the state mandates it, or we've pushed off roads for so many years. And then the budget committee can decide, like, is that okay, we know that we're not falling in line with inflation, but the town does seem to vocally support funding road rebuilding. So then we can have like an understanding of
Don't disagree at all.
the trade-offs.
So I missed the school district meeting, but I was told that the town of Amherst had been cited as an SB2 town. And I had the nicest hour-long conversation with the town administrator of Amherst after that because I missed the meeting. And the way that each department and then therefore section, because it feeds upward, has to present next year's budget is, this is what it would cost to maintain exactly what we did now, and this is what we would like to do.
Mhm.
And all the voters are presented with both pieces of information. So it sounds similar to what you just suggested.
Yeah, with the asterisk that I felt I didn't want to say maintain, because I feel like that's a very hard bar to meet. It's interesting that they can do it, but based on what I know of our contracted, like health related expenses for the school and salaries, but yeah, similar in concept, like at least in my company, we do a similar exercise. It's what each department basically says, what would you like to spend this year if you have a flat increase, aka no increase to your operating budget, and then if you get 10% more, what would your priorities be? It doesn't have to be like, we can structure it however we want, but it's just something I think that's within our purview to ask the school and the town to put together. I would think is kind of two numbers, like what, and maybe we finesse in our next meeting what we think those two numbers are. If they're like, inflation plus X or inflation minus X, whatever it is. Does that sound?
Vicky, I'm wondering about if that started getting into micromanaging.
What?
If you're looking at each department, what's level, what's,
Oh, no, yeah, I wasn't suggesting that we would see that information. I was just saying that that's how the select board builds their budget. So that they end up with two numbers that they're presenting in the in this town report, basically, which is this is what it would cost to just maintain all services. And they put that together with their departmental asks or with the department head's input. I think that that's just what they determined was the best way to stop questions, was just, by providing both answers in there. I can't remember what they call it. It's a different word than town report, but in the voters' information they send out prior to the vote. So they've got, I think, a regional school district. So he was just talking about the town, but it was an exercise they use to explain to the voters who probably have asked, what if we don't increase it? What is a wish list versus a need? There's different ways you can ask the question, but in Amherst, that's just how they build these two numbers.
The difficulty in doing that, if you say, because you got three elements, really, you got what's the current cost, today's cost of keeping the service just totally flat. Now, we all know if we're going to keep our employees, we got to give them a salary increase, fuel goes up, electricity goes up and all that. That's automatically, that's the inflation rise that you have to put in. And then you have the other things of what are you not doing today that you got to do tomorrow? So you really have three levels. I think it's unrealistic for any business or whatever to say, we're going to flatline the budget. Because that means you really have to cut because you're always dealing with inflation.
Oh, yeah, no, and the way he described it was, what would it cost to maintain services? So I think
That's
that
not an
is,
automatic increase.
Right.
right, I think that means,
Yes.
I think that means buy what you bought last year, taking into account that it's more expensive this year. How much would that be?
And in our town right now, if you just put the 3% against the total school and town budget, that's $1.3 million or $1.4 million. And people that say, we can't afford another $1.3 million or $1.4 million, period. That's what, why we get the SB2, that they're basically saying, no, we don't want any increase. And that's really unrealistic.
Probably not formally, but that's basically the process we use. Department heads present their budget to maintain and then ask additionally for anything to add. So
Yeah,
that wouldn't
and,
be.
Following up on Neil, remember our operating budget request was 6+%. Half of that was the bond. So we're looking at a 3% increase for all of our services. And that included, the additional hours for a part-time ambulance EMT person, things like that I did explain each individually. And where our big driver was on capital cost increases.
Yes, inflation.
That were driven by inflation, but at a much higher rate than the standard inflation.
Well, hopefully we're through this high inflation time. Hopefully, I mean, it's dropping back down around 3.5%, right?
Yeah.
So maybe
You have a last
this
But
is
the cost for a fire truck and all that is not dropping like that.
There's different, as Rob told us, there's different measures of inflation that I think that we could look at if we want to look at what's the most, what would be an appropriate number. There's the CPI, but I think Rob accurately pointed out, that's not necessarily the best indicator for school and municipal expenses.
Because within that big average number, there are ones that are, lower, and there are a few that,
Yeah.
are spiky. Again, like a fire truck or.
So we can look at the number. I guess and we can, I think, sleep on this till the summer or maybe even September. I'm not sure. I like the idea of saying of the budget committee. So this would be the harder ask, which is to say, let's just say the number is 3.5%. Wherever we get that number from, to say to the town, come up with your proposed budget. And if all in, all warrant articles, it's more than 3.5% increase on the tax rate, then tell us what the alternative is that would be all in at 3.5%.
Right.
Like, to me, that's sort of a straightforward thing. It's responsive to people saying, I don't want to share it, but, and we can then figure out, well, what do we think about that? And do we want to support the original proposal? And we can understand what the implications are. I think if we don't say, here's a target all in, it's hard because there's always going to be some above and beyond, some special thing, whether it's the lagoon or buildings or this or that. And so if from the voter standpoint, it's like, what's my total tax bill? And so if you know you have a big one-off and if we really were to hold the line at 3.5%, it means some really hard decisions on the operating budget. And I'm not saying we should support that. I'm just saying, like, that's the thought exercise that I think would be really informative.
Because isn't that really what an SB2 default budget is?
Hmm.
It's saying, no increase from last year.
Right, and I don't think that should be our position, but I think it could be, essentially it's limited to cost of inflation, some inflationary measure increase from last year, that's the default. And then the difference between that is what's talked about.
You look a little curious on my side.
I was just going to say it would be helpful to have that before August, even though I was hoping it wouldn't meet till September. But we start our budgets in August, and it would be helpful to have that from the beginning as we're doing our preparation and work as department heads, to know that from the beginning. So that would be my, but I think having a target is a good thing.
Do you guys know about Proposition 2.5 in Massachusetts? So correct me if I'm wrong, but in Massachusetts, the governing body can just carry on its business unless
Governing body meaning,
the
town governing body?
yeah, the municipality
okay,
can carry on about its business unless the budget goes above 2.5% over last year, in which case it goes to the vote. And the voters don't vote up or down on the budget. The voters vote to see whether or not the governing body is allowed to go above 2.5%. So there's basically a tax cap, but there's a relief valve, which is the voters. If there's the septic lagoons, which is being compelled by the state, but anyway, I admire it. I think it makes it gives a goal to work around. It gives something for, the people in the back office to anticipate. Because it is difficult when looking at all that municipal association stuff about, is the budget sustainable for the town is an ever-changing question and impossible for 10 people to answer for 6,000. So some goal is an admirable start.
Aren't they saying the same? It's not, they're not following inflation. They're following 2.5%. That
Right.
is their inflation.
Yeah,
That
that's
they're,
what
that they're
they decide.
allowing without any questions.
Yeah.
That's tough. That's a tough.
Tough one. Maybe we could start with a goal.
Right.
So, I'm hearing that we may have to address our budget committee meeting schedule. Sorry, I have to cough. Prior to August, so we'll take that into consideration when we get to that line item. I don't want to wrap this up early because it feels like a super important topic and I'm glad we talked about it tonight. Before our next meeting, whenever we do schedule it, it sounds like we need someone to volunteer to do homework on inflation rates and which one is broadly applicable. I'm happy to be the default person, but if anyone else would like to volunteer, I'm open to that as well.
I'm certainly happy to, I'm happy to help. And I think Rob would be interested, even though he's not here. I mean, I put all that data together with inflation rates and
I know. I think that's
Um,
beautiful. I hope you
kind
continue
of a
with that.
starting point, and then we can look at whether there's some other,
Which one maybe?
Metrics,
We can
yeah.
maybe have like one or two recommended
Yeah.
versions.
so
Okay.
I'm happy to at least join you in that.
Okay,
what I had,
thank you.
argued about, previously was that if we're looking at inflation rate and we're looking at affordability to our lower income individuals, the Social Security increase rate.
That was one of the factors in your looking, what wasn't it, Mark? That was one of the ones you had in there.
I think I did. I have to look.
So
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's pros and drawbacks of every single one.
Well,
Like,
I'm looking at it as though I was a low income senior and that was my income source.
right.
And
So that's that lens. I think that, you know, some of the other metrics are really looking at what is the actual cost of doing business as a municipality and a school system. And so there's just, I think we could look at some different metrics and talk about them. Yeah, but that is certainly one that gets at your exact point, Ken.
and you want to talk about what number that applies to. If it's bottom line, it would be the amount to be raised by taxes, which is probably the logical one, but
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
that's what affects the tax rate. But you just want to be clear about
Right.
the number.
The bottom line being both all the operating budgets and warrant articles combined. Yeah.
Right. Well, you could say your operating budget. We want it to be within this frame or this, but I think what you're talking about is the amount to be raised by taxes, which is what directly is
Yes,
taxed.
Yes.
Right.
yes.
Just
now that would make it a little bit harder on the town and the school, I would think, because.
or
these-
easier if we can find more revenue.
Sure.
It depends. But that's what people care about.
Right,
Yeah.
I mean, at the budget committee, we look at both of those.
Right.
They always come in, when the school came in this year, our operating budget looked really nice.
right,
But then you add the warrants to it.
Right, and then you
it
add the
jumps up a
town,
lot. And the
and-
same thing with the town, if they gotta do warrants for the bonds,
right.
for the sludge removal. It's two different pieces and we all look at them separately, but you also gotta look at certainly the bottom line, 'cause that's what the taxpayer looks at.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what matters because there's so much in play around revenue sources
Yeah.
and, you know, infrastructure acts and other things that, you know, you want to be able to take advantage of that might bump up your expenditures in a given year. But if you have offsetting revenue, who cares?
Right,
Yeah.
As long as it's one-off expenses. Not ongoing.
We're all
Yeah,
hoping
takes that.
for the suit to come back, because one of the school board members said that, they may raise instead of 3,500, the cost of.
Right,
having a
7,000,
Lewis is around $8,000. That would make a huge difference.
Except they're talking about doing it by raising the statewide property tax, which has it's just,
No sense.
so your school rate will drop and
Yeah.
your statewide property tax will go up and it's exactly the same in the end.
But,
So
that's.
I wouldn't hold my breath for any
No,
changes
the,
there.
the courts aren't expecting them to do that, but they're gonna try every darn way they possibly can to get out of it. We need more revenue from the state. I mean, that's where a lot of this venting should go towards them. I don't do it, but it should.
Mhm.
State's got to raise the money. To get more revenue from the state, they got to get more revenue from us.
Well, no, they ought to get it from the ones who are well off, is an income tax. You talk about all that, but that's the better tax from my perspective.
I'd vote for you for the state legislature.
Well, our representatives are the Democrats trying to get more money that, I don't know if they're pushing the sales tax, but that's until we get some real movement at the state, it's not gonna happen. It always boggles my mind that we're one in the top 3 educated per capita in the country, yet we're at the very bottom for the support of education. That always blows my mind.
Yeah,
The fact that many years ago, 5, 6, 7, they cut half of UNH's budget, just arbitrarily cut it.
all right,
On that
There-
happy note.
yeah. I suggest we move forward unless anyone has closing thoughts on that topic. I have a couple next steps. Rob, who's volunteered, not here. Mark and I will look into inflation rates. or what might be an appropriate rate with the hope of coming to a consensus, and we'll talk about timing. And we have all agreed on a one pager. So Ken, do you want to provide a town update?
Sure. Things are looking reasonable on expenses so far. We're 3 months into our fiscal year, which is the calendar year. A couple of things that look like they're, higher than the 25%, if you were doing a linear expenditure, are primarily due to timing, whether it was printing on the general government IT side, or a payment for most of the year for election, because we've had a number of elections already, personal administration, because there were payments that covered more than 3 months for, I believe it's workman's comp.
Workers. We don't have workman's comp, we have workers' comp.
Thank you. I stand corrected. We expect Public Works Administration to probably take a big hit due to overtime from this last storm, but we certainly, that's appropriate. Debt service, principal and interest is simply timing, and it should come out at the end of the year. So at this point, the expenses seem to be in line with as budgeted. And I don't know if anybody has questions.
Have you,
Yes,
not you,
thank you.
but has the select board had any progress on the green bags? Or-
You obviously did not listen to our meeting Monday night.
I did not, so I.
We are
apologize for that.
going
I was watching the eclipse with
Uh,
my family. that
Oh,
night.
that was after that. No, at our next meeting, that's the Monday in 19 days,
29th.
19 days. There'll be a work session on the transfer station. And that's certainly one of the issues. I believe for that one, it'll be staff coming in and talking to the board. And then there'll have to be follow-up sessions for public input and public hearings and all. But it's number one focus right now.
What is the date? Sorry.
It's
29th.
the Monday, the 29th.
Okay.
And it's a work session. And so there's no public input. It's certainly open to the public.
Is this only us or Webster involved?
This is working out our issues first.
So would a product of that work session be a price of the bag?
The product would be a public hearing later. Nothing would be finalized then. But yeah, that could be a
The bags could go away. I'm just saying theoretically, the bags, the price of the regular bags could go.
I don't know if they can because of town meeting votes. The last.
It might last a year, and then your recommendation would be to get rid of the brown bags at town meeting next year,
Green bags.
green bags.
And I guess it could be, we'll have to see.
Then would you collect revenue a different way?
Yeah, through taxes.
Okay,
Because again, I've been over there the last 5 or 6 times.
I agree.
The only one throwing a green bag in that
I
bin.
could not agree more.
The hope is out of that meeting, there'll be a plan
Okay.
and decisions. And I think as staff, we're waiting. We want some direction and whatever. At this point, I really don't care what's decided. I just want something decided and we want to do it. So.
And I think that's true for the whole board, but it's what is the step?
I think the thing that stands out for me is that given a choice, 89% of the people don't want to use the green bags, and to try to enforce something that everybody doesn't want is.
No, don't say everybody.
Sorry,
Oh.
that only 11% of the people want is just,
It's tough.
is that democracy?
And I think that the other thing to consider too are people's individual lifestyles. If you're talking elderly, they have a lot of other kinds of trash that really can pile up into that. And it doesn't mean you're not recycling. However, it puts you at a very negative disadvantage if you're being forced into something like that. When your life, because of certain situations, I just think there's a lot of other factors to consider than just using the green bag, my opinion.
Okay, there'll be a public hearing where you all can provide.
May I ask, what are we paying Waste Zero for each of the 30?
He didn't say. The
No
working
bags.
session is the 29th.
No.
I think the public hearing
Or-
is TBD.
I didn't hear.
I'm sorry, I haven't had an update in quite a while. How much do we pay Waste Zero on each trash bag of the 30-gallon ones?
We have all that, but I don't have it with me.
Okay. It used to be like 30 cents. It must have gone up quite a bit in the last 10 years.
I don't think it has.
No?
I don't think it's gonna, but I don't want to even
Okay.
venture a guess, but
Okay, maybe.
I know I provided that not long ago to the board, so we do have all that
Awesome,
information.
thank you.
They will have it all on the 29th. They will have so much information that
The sample testing of the bags and all that. I was blown away when you said at one of these meetings here, that those bags were designed to only carry so much weight.
Yes, they're designed to fall apart.
Because people talk about them falling apart, but they're jamming in 100 pounds.
It's the biggest complaint of the community. They're not as strong as Hefties. Well, they make them not as strong as Hefties
For a
on
reason.
purpose.
Right.
I pack the living daylights out of those bags and they don't break on me.
Well, you just gotta lift them carefully. That's all.
On the bottom.
Yeah, it's the drawstring that
Ah.
always gives me.
we use the same vendor as Concord, and we, at least our large bags are 1 mil thicker. We use a thicker bag than they do. So it's
They
not,
must have more robust enforcement mechanisms.
they have curbside pickup. So if you don't put it
They
in a
don't pick it
blue
up.
bag,
you
they
go.
don't pick it up. And,
Sounds like a
they're
robust
purple.
enforcement mechanism to me.
I cannot believe what a topic this is for the select board.
I know.
Day.
Yeah.
Good day.
For the 12 years I've been on the board.
It used to be plowing the private roads, now it's the green bag.
I remember those days.
Have we had green bags for 12 years, or did you
No.
come on the board and they were already? a
They
thing?
were already there.
My first town meeting, this was my 15th this year, was when it passed.
No.
And so it has been discussed. ad
It followed you.
nauseam. So if you wonder why they say, I just want them to make a decision, I just want to,
Well, I think that's part of the problem is that because the enforcement mechanism isn't directly already on the bag, it's very confusing. It's not your job to figure it out. It's not your job to figure it out, but it's not really Dan's job, Jolene's job, or the Waste Reduction Committee's job. It's nobody's job to figure out how to do it, but I get it. You guys are going to talk about it on the 29th.
Okay. Any other questions from my presentation?
What's the status on the solar array at the sewage ponds?
What, late summer, maybe?
no. Where are we at? It is in process. Work is being done now. We extended the grant into 2025, so it will be completed by the end of next year for sure. So all the surveying's being done and all of that. This is all,
Gonna fill that.
this is
open
all
spot that's
grant.
Down on the curve, is it gonna fill that spot there?
the,
That's the field that's been mowed.
yes, pretty much. As you're going in, you have the sewer lagoons on the
Left.
left
Yeah.
and the right side, the open field.
Yeah,
It will be in that area.
I
So
hope they take down those pine trees, because they're just gonna. grow.
there'll be trees coming down on both sides of
Good.
that road.
And is that going directly into the grid and then becoming a revenue source?
This is the one at the waste, at the, wherever it is.
Sewer
The-
plant.
Yeah, the sewer plant, the wastewater treatment facility, on Public Works Road
Okay.
off of,
Maple Street.
Maple Street. I was gonna say Pine Street.
Yeah.
It's been we've had 2 emergency operations in a town meeting in 3 weeks. It's a little crazy around here. So that will power, it's designed to power that facility as well as the pumping station to cover enough to cover most of the pumping station that's
cool.
down in Riverway Park.
And how many kilowatts will that system be, do you know?
I do, but I don't
It's
remember.
100, it's 100.
Is it
kilowatts.
100?
100 kilowatts AC.
Nice.
Probably like 100.
Nice.
AC, something like that.
And Revision Energy did get the contract, so they're working on that. So
It's not big enough to power the public works.
it is not.
That's over 400 amps. That's good.
Remember, the motors at the wastewater treatment facility run constantly aerating the pond, the duck pond.
Any other questions for Ken?
Do you know, Ken, what about the solar array at the landfill? Any updates? I know they paid their option, but I mean, do we have any sense of whether they're planning to build it?
Well, the fact that they paid $30,000, recently, it would say to me that, yes, they're planning to build it. I think they're still in the interconnection
Yeah,
discussion.
waiting for their connection, so,
So that's at the landfill site at the.
That's at the transfer,
station.
yes.
Yeah,
Must be
It
fun.
may get easier, given that they pulled the large transmission line project. That was part of the problem. And now that that's gone, hopefully that will move forward more quickly, their interconnection issues.
would that be a revenue source then?
Oh, absolutely. That could be, well, we're projecting 150,000 a year of revenues,
Plus.
once it's fully up and running.
Good.
Okay. Moving on to Dawn for Kentucky Village Precinct update.
I don't have a sheet to hand out, but in general, we have a new operator, hired operator, if you will. And they're in the process now of evaluating and updating all the pumping stations and the plant itself. And that's gonna be quite a few dollars, 50,000, 60,000, whatever. And this, all the things that needs to be done to get us up basically to where we should be. It does not satisfy what we're gonna need to do in the future for big picture, whether that's a new tank, we're talking millions there. So at the end of this year, we should have a much better feel as to, well, we'll have a better system, and then we'll have a much better information source as to where we need to go in the next 5 years. So, but they seem really sharp, and they're doing this in many places in the state. So it's a really first-class operator.
Dawn, with what I guess the grants that the federal government just announced with regards to PFAS, is PFAS an issue with the Kentucky precinct?
Haven't heard that.
Okay, good.
It's everywhere, but
Mhm.
it's sort of like the question is why you can't trust matter. Because it makes up everything. But yeah, it's just, I think we're lucky in that part. We haven't got that. The lead, the removal of any lead pipes is the big McGill that everybody's dealing with. Certainly this precinct is dealing with it. Because you've got to do so many samples, and you got to really, come up with some plan to remove all the lead connections that are between the precinct's connection, which is basically at the street, and where they use it in their house. And that's where most of the lead connections are. It's the responsibility of the homeowner to do that replacement at their cost, but the identification of it is of course assigned to the precinct.
Mhm.
And that's sort of going through its process.
When is that expected to be completed?
Which part?
The identification of the lead connection?
I think that'll be in the next few months. That's my guess. I'm just hearing what I hear. So they have to do a bunch of samples, and then at some point, you gotta literally go into each house and do the sampling,
Right.
which doesn't necessarily identify where it is.
Right.
And the other thing is to literally scratch the pipe that's coming in to see if it's soft, if you can, see it by scratching it. That's all I got.
Great. Any other questions for Dawn? Okay. Moving on to Hopkinton Village Precinct update.
The water people also have to do a lead test, but the the deadline, I guess, was extended. It was originally October 31st, and there was an outcry that that's impossible. And so the deadline, I think, according to Rick, who's the head of our water board, I think he said it was pushed back to like December 2025. Like they gave them enough time because, like you said, there's 2 points of test per house, 5 feet out in front and inside. So you have to get inside the house and you have to dig out everybody's yard, right? Everybody's connection and scrape the pipe. It sounds crazy, but I understand why we're doing it. Like the septic look good. It's like, so my sister-in-law, just tangent, works in wastewater treatment for the state of Oregon. She's in charge of the inspectors for the state of Oregon. And although she totally sympathizes with our situation, she said, kick the can down the road as far as you can. It's everywhere. And eventually we can't make municipalities pay to clean it up. And she said, it's not as if we shouldn't clean it up, but eventually it's going to become totally unsustainable to ask individual localities to be responsible for it.
For the PFAS.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we have that option because we're being compelled by the state, but that was her outside perspective. And she cares about the environment more than anyone else I know, but she was just, appalled at what we're on a local level being asked to take on. We had our annual meeting the week after town meeting. It was not very well attended, but everything went fine and we had
On the agenda.
no one asked us to put it on the agenda. But we decided that with a conversation with Department of Transportation, I don't want to say blessing, but with a conversation, we're going to start planting sugar maple saplings along Main Street, asking residents, we're going to buy the saplings, and then we're going to ask the residents who have over the years lost much of the original sugar maple canopy if they would like to plant these trees. So we're going to start really small. We're going to start with like a dozen and see who wants them. And it's confusing. The reason why the Department of Transportation is brought up is because of the nature strip in between somebody's yard and the road. There's the middle green, and the Department of Transportation owns that. So it's unclear whether or not we would be allowed to plant the saplings in that part, or if it would have to be further back by on somebody's clearly private property. But anyway, that was.
I think Dan Blanchett might be able to answer some of those questions.
Absolutely. And I think Thomas said he was going to talk to Dan about it. Oh,
It's a state right of way, but it's a little unclear here because
It
I
is.
think actually the right of way may come up close to this building. Because I think this road was 2 lanes at one point.
yes, right. It was a boulevard.
So it's a very interesting, an unusual situation here.
It's interesting. Neil has corrected me a couple of times on this thing, that the state or the town owns rights to the right of way,
Right.
but the owners own the land.
Oh,
And all the trees, the town doesn't own trees. But the trees are on your private land because you own to the middle of the road.
But it doesn't mean
do
you do,
Everybody.
Do I?
but it doesn't mean you can plant trees in the state's right of way. Not, you own them if they're falling down.
Right.
They're not gonna let you put more there.
It sounds like this clarified that very clearly for me one day.
All the liability, none of the benefit. That's so nice though, that you're trying to do that. It'd be great to return some sugar maples, and plant some new ones. I'm curious, Vicky, where do things stand with the intersection here? And
So we made a non-binding support resolution of changing the intersection, but allocated no money to it. And that was somewhat based on the need for clarity about whether our allocation would have to be the total cost of the project, or whether it would be something that, we could partner with the town or partner with the historical society or partner with.
Doesn't fit into the inflation rate. So
Yeah,
look at the
exactly.
state.
Exactly. No, exactly. And think about that, right? I mean, our whole budget's $26,000, so. So the inflation rate would really get blown out of the water.
Sorry.
But, you know, there's been a lot of conversations about how much it would cost to do it, you know, in a moderate way versus in a really blown out way with granite curbing and, you know, sort of how much would it cost to do a, you know, slightly more formal version of what was done versus really cutting that triangle out of the center and putting grass in it and putting granite curbs on it. And, you know, so it's unclear how much money it would take and how formal we should try and do it. But it was resolved by the group that we're in favor of changing it. And that Department of Transportation has basically said, if you're going to change it, fine, but we're not gonna pay for it. And we're not going to put it in any plans. But I think they understand that the intersection is dangerous and they wouldn't be opposed to making it safer.
Are the options like put in that? I forget what was done on the interim testing, but like, are the options like at the low end, do a more formal version of that up to like put in like a pretty roundabout? Is that something that you're?
So
Like,
no,
what
the
is, like,
roundabout
the-
is not being spoken
Okay.
about. It's more about like, it's,
But that would be cool.
it would be
I'll go
cool.
on the record.
It would be cool, but changing
Strong opinions about it.
So changing the nature of the pavement, as far as I understand, gets too deep for us because there's serious drainage issues out there, and the drainage issues are way further than we can muster the energy to address. So it would be more about blocking off the soft right
Yeah.
to get onto Briar or Hopkinton Road and recreating that hard stop at the Cracker Barrel where folks can take a right, like a hard right if they want to. And then, you know, theoretically cutting the center out of the triangle and putting green in it, and which would help with drainage issues, honestly, right? Because it would be absorbent instead of just creating more runoff. But that's the extent of the conversations. Oh, and then what am I trying to say? Crosswalks. And then like, you know, putting back, I think the 2 temporary crosswalks that were part of the experiment.
Has any been thought of putting in literally large boulders rather than tearing up any pavement or anything out?
Well,
Large boulders.
absolutely. You mean to just say you can't drive there
Well,
anymore.
no, it would be instead of granite or any of the curbing or the flashing
Right.
signs or whatever, just put in very large boulders and make it all cut off. It would be inexpensive. If it didn't work, you'd take them back out again.
Yep, that's a really good point. I'll bring it up because we have a wealth of boulders in this
You
town.
know, They're very available.
As someone who drives tractor trailers now and again, I would say that granite curbs are are tough on truck tires.
Yeah,
If you can,
and they get destroyed.
if you can, you know, those cobblestones that kind of go up so that some guy from out of town who doesn't know the intersection very well can come up onto those cobbles and it won't
Destroy his
end
axle.
in a flat tire.
Mhm.
Like what happens all the time over on the over by Hannah Dustin on Route, what is that, Route 3, 4 intersection?
Mhm.
That those,
Just think how many of those granite posts and the chains in front of the fire department, that triangle, they get nailed regularly with trailer trucks trying to turn there and not being used to it.
thank you, that's all.
It would be cool to, I just wonder if you could raise even private money. I mean, there are a lot of people who care about this town, who have resources to actually hire somebody who could develop that lightweight plan.
Mhm, mhm.
Essentially, like what's the low cost plan? Some combination of boulders, paint, maybe some flower,
Well,
some
not-
planters. Um, and a cost estimate, which wouldn't be a big lift, but somebody's capable of doing that. I
Mhm.
just imagine like that would be good. And then you might actually be able to privately fund. I mean, it's in the precinct, but it's a town issue. Like
Mhm.
everyone in our town drives through this intersection.
Right.
And, it just strikes me you might be able to fund this at low cost with non-tax dollars. But you need like the clear plan.
Yeah.
as a First step, and it'd be interesting to see if some people would kick in for that.
Absolutely. That's similar to our conversation about the skate park, right? I mean, I know that that is, a bigger lift. But I think the same applies. There could be a lot of people interested in supporting it.
Right. I do support talking about the skate park at another meeting. Any other questions for Vicky? Okay. Rob is not here.
His email said if you had specific questions, feel free to email him.
Okay.
And
If
he'll,
you have specific questions, feel free to email Rob. What was that, Neil? Did I cut you off?
and he was under the weather, so he was intending to come, but it was a late.
Can we email those directly or do we have to go through you?
You don't have to go through me.
Okay. Oh, I didn't know.
No, you can email him.
Official.
Don't email the whole group, but email him directly.
Okay.
That's a change in the current school board.
All right, then, moving on, I guess the next item is our meeting schedule. So we alluded to this earlier, but if we are going to put in a guidepost, a request has been made from Neil that ideally that would come before August. So I don't have my phone out. I just want to be rude, but looking at a calendar, that would mean that we meet before August. Not to say the obvious. So obviously this is our April meeting that leaves May, June, and July. I don't know if there are distinct preferences. We can take a vote on each month and then drive towards consensus.
It sort of depends on when Mark and you can come up with this data information that it will certainly help me figure out what I would recommend.
Mhm.
So it sort of depends on how soon you can get that information and present it to us, and then we can have that further discussion.
I'm gonna work on it in the 1 week leading up to whenever the meeting is scheduled.
I appreciate that honesty.
All right, let's do it next month.
No.
Yeah, I guess I would prefer not July I feel like that's a very common vacation
Yeah.
for everyone.
I guess I'm leaning toward next month, and then June and July are expected, like, we don't expect to meet.
Okay,
So what do you think?
May's a good month.
May is a good month, so that would be May 8th, if I have it right, the second Wednesday
Yeah.
in May. It seems that all in attendance here are in favor of that. Okay, so let's say May 8th at 5:30. And,
And that would also be good for our new member too, who hasn't had a chance to be here yet.
right, we can swear him in and give him an early look at the fun.
First day of sandwich boarding.
What?
First day of wearing the sandwich board.
Oh, yeah.
I was never in a fraternity. I missed out on hazing.
You didn't get hazed in high
I
school?
didn't get hazed. I get people.
Okay.
Here for a minute.
And then,
Okay.
I don't know, I think we can probably take a decision on if we meet in August, so then we will plan no June or July.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I think we can talk about August when we get to May, but, I think last year we did meet in August. I think we usually do.
Mhm.
Is that right? So.
I think you waited till September.
Oh, did we?
I
Thank
think
you.
maybe it was like we weren't gonna have a quorum, right? I think when we met in April, we said we were gonna meet in
Mm.
August.
Yeah, That sounds right. Well, let's have our meeting in May and we can review, hopefully we'll have Rob and Charlie back. They can take a decision on August then. But, okay, any other comments on budget committee meeting schedules?
If it makes any sense or is convenient, prior to that May 8th, if you can send out, sort of what your synopsis is of your information, and then we can digest that a bit before we get it called here. But I don't know if that makes any sense or not.
That makes total sense.
That's
I
an
think-
admirable goal.
It's an admirable goal.
So we're gonna have these indicators, but we also need to decide on a time period. Right? Because if we decide that the social security increase is the best for us, then that's easy because they only do it once a year. But if it's like, for instance, the CPI, we could measure the CPI at any interval we want and it would change. So we would have to decide what's reasonable because the inflation is currently coming down, but we don't know what the future holds.
Yeah, tricky. I mean, that's why you really redo it, that it's whatever it is, we're gonna have some time period, so. I think we can look at what data is available. CPI is pretty easy to calculate. We could do the last 12 months through whenever the latest data is available, certainly through February, maybe through March. Some of the other ones that are like the more customized ones, I don't know how frequently they're updated or made publicly available, but we just have to, I mean, I think whatever it is, we can just say what's the data that's available and then the committee should discuss.
All that's gonna be a moving target, forever.
Yeah,
That would argue for not going with a percentage till as late as we can.
All we're trying to do is assess what the possibilities of what we're gonna think about. All the different
What's most helpful would be if you come out of that meeting saying, this is the percentage that's our goal. I
Yeah.
don't come out saying, well, all this stuff, just give us
No,
a
right,
percentage.
exactly.
And
I'm inclined to think, yes, it's good to be accurate, but whatever number we pick, realistically, it's gonna be between 2 and 7, I would guess,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah.
So like with some, like, yes, it could change and like, but I think, if we come back in August and it's like something crazy happened in the summer that may have moved it
yeah,
an
revisit.
entire percentage point. And the town is struggling to meet it or whatever, like we can revisit it. It's not like we're writing down,
Totally.
thou shalt not ever cross.
Here's our current guidance.
Right.
We reserve the right to revisit it.
Any other comments on meeting schedule? Hearing none, we'll open to public comment.
No.
no one's on.
Hearing none. We will move to any other business to come before the committee.
I just have something that I've been wondering about, and Neil, it might be directed towards you. And that is that I've heard that the federal government is looking to help with, and I briefly mentioned it earlier to you, the PFAS, so that the states will be given funds to help with it. In other words, it's not going to fall on just the towns. How does something like that work into if the state is requiring us to start using our own funds, but we know that we've got this other money that's potentially, is there a way to put holds on things, or would this, I guess I'm just asking before we, spend our funds, if this is going to be happening, how sure a thing does it have to be until the state would say, we'll wait?
That is a good question. There's been lots of money that's been made available at different times. And often there's no criteria as to there's no guidelines as to how this is going to be done. I can tell you that we have submitted that project to both Senator Shaheen's office and to Annie Custer's office. As far as a congressional directs appropriation for that. We also, this week, DES, New Hampshire DES is doing all their grant workshops, which we've been part of. We've submitted pre-applications. I'm trying to think where else. There are numerous different things, and our top project is clearly the lagoon cleanup and the sludge, which is related to it. So we are monitoring all those and applying for those.
That's wonderful. It just seems easier not to, thank you for all that work. But I also just, in my mind, think it's easier to not spend the money than to spend it and then try to get it back. Because this trickled down, but thank you.
We are pretty definitely eligible for low interest loans, and probably could have some of that forgiven. And when I say some of it forgiven, like 100,000, we're not talking dramatic amounts, but at least that point. So that's pretty likely. But we are pursuing, we provided the select board on Monday night a list of all the grants that we've been working on. And you have to weigh the time to do it versus the likelihood that you will receive it too. Because there are definitely grants, a lot of the recreational grants and other grants that are out there that are based on CBDG funding, which has income requirements. And in all honesty, Hopkinton does not qualify for low income under any of those standards.
I would just encourage the committee, in terms of other business, to just on an individual basis, follow what's going on in the housing committee, the economic development committee, and the planning board as to just large zoning changes for our community that might take place. Multi-unit housing, duplexes, triplexes, things that we've never had before, urban style housing, eight houses per acre was one proposal that got bounced around last year. And I personally would like to know what kind of an effect that would have on our school system costs, what kind of effect that would have on our town services costs. And that was one part of it that didn't come through in that proposal. I did talk to one member of the planning board about it, and there weren't enough I's dotted and T's crossed to come up with that kind of information yet. But certainly following that, perhaps asking them to give us a presentation might be not out of the possibilities that we could do. So that's it.
That's an interesting, can we do that? We can do that, right, Neil?
You can. It's likely going to be a while. There's nothing imminent. That would be at least fall before there would be any possibilities.
Okay.
But some of the housing work is being funded by grants.
On that sort of got shot down, if you will, right at the end of the year. Have they started back up again to try to flush?
I think there's some confusion because the housing committee has not brought anything forward at this point. They're still doing their preliminary work. There was a proposal brought forward by EDC. But EDC is not working on that any longer. The housing committee is working on their work, and it's really preliminary. So they haven't reached any conclusions at all at this point.
It's the EDC one that came in and had, like 4,000 different, if we built on every single possible existing zoning, that was an incredible amount of building that could be done. Was that the one that you're referring to?
That was the only thing that was discussed last year, but I think that might be an exaggeration. I think we'd have more than 4,000 houses if we built on everything you could build on now. And there are areas where more than 8 homes or units are allowed on an acre already. So it's probably really important to wait till they do their work and then present it, because there seems to be a lot of misinformation out there and different information. So I think we just let the process play out and see what proposal, if any, comes out of it.
Has everyone seen the proposal that the EDC came up with?
No.
To propose, okay, so if you go to the planning board website and then look under EDC proposals 2024, I believe it came out in August of 2024. And
23.
23?
sorry, thank you, 2023. And you can look over the proposal. There was, like nice pictures of what 8 houses per acre would look like. And there was discussions of of 4 different zones in the town that would be rezoned, 3 on Maple Street and then 1 on Bernardsville, with the acreages of each of those parcels.
And I would say the process worked because that didn't move forward. So
Yep.
I wouldn't waste too much time looking at that
Yeah.
because it's really
That's
probably
not gonna happen.
right. It's off the table. So I think
Okay. It's Burnham's Interval's a dead end road, isn't it?
Yes, but it's the formal industrial zoned area that could, that would, it would be the proposal was for a zoning overlay district to create multi-unit housing in an industrial zone.
Ah,
So those 4 places were industrial zones, or most of them anyway.
Well, it would be interesting if there is a formal proposal from the housing committee to get a presentation of that.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
This is the year we're doing the reval,
yes.
and I'm trying to think, will that come into play in terms of what is calculated around tax rates
Good
for
question.
what's going to be going before the voters next year, or is it the following year?
It will. So we will, because this year's tax rate will be set with the new values. We'll be comparing this year with the new values to next year so that
So in the fall, we'll have the new values,
correct.
and so in that.
Before you begin your work, that all the new values should be set, the tax rate will be close to being set or set. It's really this past year, you're going to see a much lower tax rate in 2024 than we said you would when we proposed everything because we were using the old values, but that's the only way you can do it. So
Got it.
You'll-
So what
you-
people pay this year in dollars, obviously will become comparable to next year, but then also this year, you will actually adjust the rates based on the reval. So when we approve a budget this year for next year, it'll be like 17% to 18%. I'm making that up, not 20 or whatever it was. Like,
right, it should be, the tax rate was 35.02
right.
this year, and it probably will be less than 20.
Right.
So, but we'll know what that is. And so what we bring you will compare the actual 2024 tax rate and amount appropriated, which stays the same.
Yeah.
Which is consistent
Good.
no matter the value compared to the new tax rate. So
The valuation that's on our card for each of us is based on basically the assessment that was determined almost 5 years ago now, correct?
yes, so the numbers used in the matrix and all the things that create that value are based on sales in 2017 and 18, which became values in 2019.
You would only see it, and this is only at a summation, the equalized tax rate for the town. That he keeps adding the 20% on basically each year, right? So
Right,
if you
so-
only looked at that, you'd really see if you can't translate that to an individual home. So I guess I'm getting it.
Right. It's and our equalization rate was, I believe it was 62.1 for 2023. So that means all of our properties are assessed at 62.1% of fair market value. Those are going to go up to fair market value. So that means that your tax rate should drop by that same 40%. So you're collecting the same amount.
The new house or a house that's just been sold at the new market value, is it true that a house at $1 million market value would not be necessarily assessed at that? It would be assessed at maybe 700,000. Is that real, or is the $1 million
So
sale value, is that what they're going to be assessed at?
So they should be, well, it's mass appraisal. So they use the sales to create what things are worth, but it should be pretty close to that fair market value. If that was an arm's length transaction at $1 million, that property probably should be assessed at $1 million.
But the
It's-
actual sale price that any individual one of us paid for our houses does not come into play.
Oh, not on your house, other than if you're-
Historically,
other than if you're making an argument for an abatement or you're trying to argue your assessment is wrong and you have a recent sale. But if any sales that have happened in the last 2 years or less that were arm's length transactions, fair market transactions, will be used to help determine the values that will be used. And that new house that's built, when they enter it into the system, is assessed right now or in 2023 at the 2019 values. So
Neil, I'm curious. I've heard from a couple people in a couple of other towns that have more commercial tax space, but that the tax burden shifted in more on residential homeowners because the growth in property value of residential properties has significantly exceeded that of commercial. And we don't have quite that discrepancy, but we certainly do have some commercial property in town. And as much as you can prognosticate, like,
that's a good question. And my guess is they're going to have to use commercial property sales of surrounding towns to help determine that, because we just don't have, we might not have any this year, for example. So that will be a good question, because if those properties, certainly if you look at Concord and you take the mall, which is empty, has much less value than it used to. If that value lowers and property have gone up, then the burden clearly shifts to residential. So I could see where that's very possible.
what percent of our, whatever it is, $790 million is commercial?
I'm thinking it's less than 10, 8 or 7. I can
Well, that
look
helps
that
too.
up, but
So
that's my
That
recollection.
might help
How
second
does
the impact.
utilities fit in? Because this is substantial assessment on utilities.
Right, but they're assessed separately, so we will not see utilities go up the same, which shifts more of the burden to residential properties.
Mhm.
That's
This isn't gonna be in our favor. None of this is gonna be. in our
none of
favor.
it seems to go in
Yeah,
the residential property favor.
Mhm.
yeah, okay. We should be prepared for that.
When do the revals get announced or when are they public? When are they available to homeowners?
So hopefully they'll be done, and every homeowner, the hopefully part was that they'll be done. Every homeowner will receive in the mail a letter with their value, as well as a number to call to schedule an appointment. I say it everywhere, schedule that appointment and sit down with the assessor and go through your card and make sure it's accurate. It's really worth doing. But they should be by like August, either August or September, and then we'll have those hearings, and then they're finalized. The board officially accepts them sometime after that point.
The official tax rate that you get at the end of the year, which you always give us a copy of, that's set, that's available when?
When it's set. So it's always interesting that DRA sets the tax rate, but DRA sets the tax rate using the numbers we give DRA. So there are numbers. So it could be later than usual this year, depending on where the reval is. It's not unusual when you're doing a reval to not have your final values set. So we have to provide all of our values on what's called the MS1, which is in the town report, which lists all that. And that's that and the and the MS 727, which you all signed, as well as what was actually appropriated. All of that is used to set the tax rate, but we provide DRA all the information. They just plug and chug it, basically.
I'm still missing the connection between that state setting the tax rate at the end of the year, the November, or whenever it comes out, and what you're saying that our individual new tax rates will be. Are those two tied together?
The August rate will be your assessed value, not your tax rate. So we need to do all those assessed values. People get them, have hearings, and then after they're officially set and approved by the select board, then we fill out the MS1, which goes to the state, so they know what our property is worth. And so they cannot act or do any until those rates are in. So
What's the time frame you're guessing that'll take all the people who are gonna come in with their new,
I would hope the values will be out before September and hopefully at the latest mid-October.
thinking a
we
month
would-
and a half.
We would have them all set and then it goes, and then once they're set, we can in a couple hours run the get the MS1 done and that's set, and then DRA does their thing.
I know you're encouraging everybody to come in, but my God, we got what, 3,000 people who could come in here. A lot of them won't, but that's a big burden to try.
Only
to
about
staff.
6 will listen to me.
I think
You're inviting everyone.
6 of 3,000. 0.00001.
You're thinking of the SB2 deliberative session.
I know 5 years ago, there were hearings 2 Saturdays in a row as well as weekdays.
Yeah.
And they were all done in
I would think.
like less than 2 weeks,
A lot
everything.
of people would come in with this one because it's gonna be a big change. At a time when substantial increases in the pricing of selling houses in Hopkinton. So, you know, the valuations are gonna go up, you can say, what, 60% at least.
Maybe or maybe not. If you just bought your house for $1 million and it comes in
I did.
and is assessed at 990,000, I think probably people who haven't sold their house will be surprised what it's worth.
Right.
Find out.
We will find out.
People might be selling.
We will really try also to have a calculator that people can enter their new value compared to their old value. And to try to, we're trying to figure out how to best show people what their new tax would be. Of course, we won't have the new rate, but so we're comparing apples to apples that so they don't get too worried that the tax rate stays at 3502 and their assessment goes up 40%. Those two things should not be the case. If
That
they
would be really
are,
helpful.
your percentage is going to have to be really low.
Hang on to your hat.
Yes.
Can we go home now?
It's going to be a busy year.
It's not-
Make a motion to go home. Pretty please at Sugar on top.
Second.
Seconded. All in favor of adjourning the committee?
Aye.
Any nays?